The Colosseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheater, is one of Rome's most famous buildings, an enduring monument to the culture of the ancient Romans. It is an elliptical amphitheater in the centre of the city, the largest ever built in the Roman Empire. It is considered one of the greatest works of Roman architecture and Roman engineering. Completed in 80 AD, it was designed to host huge spectacles. The amphitheater has almost 2,000 years of history. This is where the ancient Romans gathered to watch bloody combat between gladiators and battles between men and wild animals. This is where they threw people to the lions. Anyone could attend the events in the Colosseum, as admission was free. Today, it's a major tourist attraction, playing host to 3.9 million visitors each year. The history of Rome spans 2,800 years of the existence of a city that grew from a small Italian village in the 9th century BC into the centre of a vast civilization that dominated the Mediterranean region for centuries. Its political power was eventually replaced by that of peoples of mostly Germanic origin, making the beginning of the Middle Ages. Rome became the seat of the Roman Catholic Church and the home of a sovereign state, the Vatican City within its walls. Today it is the capital of Italy, an international worldwide political and cultural centre, a major global city, and is regarded as one of the most beautiful cities of the ancient world. Ancient Roman architecture adopted certain aspects of ancient Greek architecture, creating a new architectural style. The Romans were indebted to their Etruscan neighbours and forefathers who supplied them with a wealth of knowledge essential for future architectural solutions, such as hydraulics and in the construction of arches. Later, they absorbed Greek and Phoenician influence, apparent in many aspects closely related to architecture. This can be seen in the introduction and use of the triclinium in Roman villas as a place and a manner of dining. The Pantheon is a supreme example of this, particularly in the version rebuilt by Hadrian, which remains perfectly preserved and which over the centuries has served as the inspiration for countless public buildings. Life in ancient Rome revolved around the city of Rome, located on 7 hills. The city had a vast number of monumental structures, like the Colosseum, the Forum of Trajan, and the Pantheon. It had theatres, gymnasiums, marketplaces, functional sewers, bath complexes complete with libraries and shops, and fountains with fresh drinking water supplied by hundreds of miles of aqueducts. Throughout the territory under the control of ancient Rome, residential architecture ranged from modest houses to country villas. In the capital city of Rome, there were imperial residences on the elegant Palatine Hill, from which the word palace derives. The low plebeian and middle equestrian classes lived in the city centre, packed into apartments or insulae, which were almost like modern ghettos. These areas, often built by upper-class property owners to rent, were often centred upon collegia or taberna. These people, provided with a free supply of grain and entertained by gladiatorial games, were enrolled as clients of patrons among the upper-class patricians, whose assistance they sought and whose interests they upheld. The Colosseum, projected by Ribeiro or maybe Gaudenzio, was welcoming long combats between gladiators, executions and hunting spectacles. More or less 80,000 spectators were following the combats that could go on from sunrise to sunset, and also up to the deepest night. According to the chronicles of the time, it looks like that the fights preferred by the public were the chaotic melange of tens of gladiators, invented by the Imperator Claudio, called sportule. All the religious celebrations, the recurrence and the military victories were celebrated during the imperial era with the combats of the gladiators. Emperor Nero was born near Rome on the 15th of December 37 AD and was known as a child as Mightiest. Through his mother Agrippina, he was the only surviving direct male descendant of the Emperor Augustus. In 49 AD, Agrippina married her uncle, the Emperor Claudius, and began to promote her own son's claim to the succession at the expense of Claudius's own son, Britannicus. She persuaded Claudius to adopt Domitius, who now took the name Nero, as his son, and when it seemed as if Britannicus would be favoured, she had Claudius poisoned, and Nero became emperor. Agrippina clearly wished to rule through Nero, and her portrait briefly appeared on the coins alongside his. But the new emperor paid more heed to his advisors, Burrus and the philosopher Seneca, and the result was 5 years of exemplary government. Britannicus was poisoned by Nero a year into the new reign, and in 59 AD, he had his mother put to death. In 62 AD, Burrus died and Seneca retired, removing the key restraining influences on Nero. He divorced his wife Octavia, who was later executed, and married his mistress. 2 years later, much of Rome was destroyed in a fire, for which Nero was blamed, although this is now regarded as unlikely. Nero diverted blame from himself by accusing the Christians, then a minor religious sect, of starting the fire, leading to a campaign of persecution. He provided help for Romans made homeless by the fire and set about the necessary rebuilding of the city, appropriating a large area for a new palace for himself. This was the architecturally and artistically innovative Golden House, Domus Aurea. A series of treason laws in AD 62 and the colossal fire in Rome of AD 64, which destroyed most of the city, helped seal Nero's reputation. Nero used the treason laws to kill anyone he considered a threat. In the year 65, Nero appeared in public as an entertainer. The next year, a conspiracy was hatched to replace him with Calpurnius Piso. The Senate declared him a public enemy, and he committed suicide on the 9th of June 68 AD. Disputes over his succession led to a civil war in Rome. The Emperor Vespasian started the construction of the Colosseum about a decade after Nero's reign and the Great Fire on Rome in 64 AD. Vespasian wanted to give a spectacular enhancement to the Forum's area and central Roman city life, which had depreciated as a public centre under Nero's reign. The name of this new amphitheater was initially the Flavian Amphitheater, in honour of Vespasian's ancestors. The name Colosseo, apparently derived from a nearby bronze statue of Nero that was defined as colossal, was later given at some time in the medieval ages. Vespasian died a year before the completion of the Colosseum, but it was nevertheless officially inaugurated in 80 AD by Titus, one of his sons. A few years later, Domitian, the youngest of Vespasian's son, became emperor, and he expanded the Colosseum's construction by increasing its crowd capacity at the 3rd level. He also commissioned the development of an underground network of tunnels and cells to contain slaves and wild animals. The Colosseum was used as a sport and drama amphitheatre for about 500 years. Over these years, the Colosseum had to receive major repairs, especially after a lightning-caused fire in 217 AD. Even after the fall of Rome in 476 AD, although there were no more gladiator flights, it was still used for spectacle kind of events, like animal hunting and drama, for almost a century. It then eventually lost its initial entertainment vocation to serve as housing in the early medieval ages. It was even used as a castle at some point by a very influential Roman family. After the Great Roman Earthquake of 1349 AD, which left large damages on the Colosseum, a religious community used the old amphitheatre as a home up until the early 1800s. In the mid-18th century, the Pope Benedict XIV declared the Colosseum sacred because of the Christian martyrs that apparently perished in the arena in its earlier history. The Colosseum was the empire's primary stage for gladiatorial combat for nearly 4 centuries. In a show of Rome's wealth and extravagance during the opening ceremonies in 80 AD, 100 days of the games were held. The ancient Romans were great builders. They built things to last. The Colosseum was built of concrete, faced with stone, as were most amphitheatres. It was built in the early days of the Roman Empire. Construction was initiated by the Emperor Vespasian around 72 AD. His son Titus reigned over its completion and the official opening ceremonies about 8 years later in 80 AD. It was built near the site of Nero's Domus Aurea. This is significant in that his successor Vespasian wanted to erase the memory of Nero's extravagant reign from the minds of Romans. It got its popular name, the Colosseum, because of Nero's colossal statue of himself, which was nearby. The huge theatre was originally built encompassing 4 floors. The first 3 had arched entrances, while the 4th floor utilised rectangular doorways. The floors each measured between 10 to 13 metres in height. The total height of the construction was approximately 48 metres. The Colosseum had a total spectator capacity up to 55,000. There were no less than 76 numbered entrances and 4 additional entrances reserved for the Emperor, other VIPs and the gladiators. The Colosseum was designed for easy crowd dispersal. The entire audience could exit the building in 5 minutes. The interior was divided into 3 parts: the arena, the podium and the cavea. Now more than 2/3 of the original building had been removed and the rows of the seats in the cavea are missing. The audience upon entering climbed sloping ramps to their seats, according to gender and social class. Obviously, the higher one's social status, the better their seating arrangement would be. For example, women accepting spouses and perhaps imperial family, and the poor, stood or sat on wooden benches in the 4th tier. For inclement or very hot weather conditions, an enormous coloured awning could be stretched overhead to protect the crowd. A wooden floor covered subterranean chambers where the gladiators and animals were kept waiting to perform. There is some debate over the idea that the Colosseum was occasionally flooded for mock naval battles. Algem is a town in Tunisia and is home to some of the most impressive Roman remains in Africa. Algem is famous for its amphitheater, often incorrectly called a Colosseum, capable of seating 35,000 spectators. Only Rome's Colosseum and the ruined theatre of Capua are larger. The amphitheater at Algem was built by the Romans under proconsul Gordian, who was acclaimed Emperor Thystrus, and was probably mainly used for gladiator shows and chariot races. It is also possible that construction of the amphitheater was never finished. Until the 17th century, it remained more or less whole. From then on, its stones were used for building the nearby village of Algem and transported to the Great Mosque in Kairouan. And at a tense moment during struggles with the Ottomans, the Turks used cannons to flush rebels out of the amphitheater. The ruins of the amphitheater were declared a World Heritage Site in 1979. The amphitheater was used for filming some of the scenes from the 1979 Monty Python film, The Life of Brian, and was also used for filming some of the scenes from the film Gladiator. The city of Pompeii is a partially buried Roman city near modern Naples. Along with Herculaneum, Pompeii was destroyed and completely buried during a long catastrophic eruption of the volcano Mount Vesuvius, spanning 2 days in the year AD 79. The eruption buried Pompeii under 4 to 6 metres of ash and pumice, and it was lost for nearly 1,700 years before its accidental rediscovery in 1749. Since then, its excavation has provided an extraordinarily detailed insight into the life of a city at the height of the Roman Empire. Today, this UNESCO World Heritage Site is one of the most popular tourist attractions of Italy. It is presumed that the amphitheatre in Pompeii must have provided the basic model for the subsequent buildings. The form derives from the duplication of the structure of the theatre. Amphitheatre means double theatre or circular theatre. It is an elliptical structure situated in a depression in the ground and backing onto embankments. It consists of a large cavea around which are the steps, divided into sections, which cover the entire perimeter of the construction. The amphitheatre in Pompeii is an impressive and grandiose construction, capable of holding up to 12,000 spectators. It hosted all the circus shows and the gladiatorial games so dear to the Pompeians, who devoted most of their spare time to these performances. The period of its construction dates back to 80 BC and is therefore one of the oldest buildings in existence, which leads to the inference that it might have represented a model for all of those which were subsequently built in Rome. It was constructed in part by making use of an embankment, in part by digging down into the earth for several metres. The access steps are outside the building. The doors on the western side lead into the arena. Unlike the other Roman amphitheatres, the one in Pompeii does not have an underground section. It was equipped with a velarium, that is a cover which was stretched over the complex in case of rain. The rings to which the canopy was fixed can still be seen. The Circus Maximus was the largest stadium in ancient Rome. At one point, the circus could seat 250,000 people, 1/4 of Rome's population. Chariot races were one of the Romans' most popular form of entertainment. Romulus, the first of Rome's 7 kings, is said to have held chariot races there. The origins of the Circus Maximus go back to the 6th century BC, when Priscus, the 5th king of Rome, created a track between the Palatine and Aventine hills. The first permanent starting gates were created in 329 BC. In 174 BC, the gates were rebuilt, and 7 wooden eggs were placed on top of the spina, the central wall in the arena. The eggs were used to count the number of laps. After each lap, 1 egg was removed. In 33 BC, 7 bronze dolphins were added to the spina for the same purpose. A fire in 31 BC, the first of 3, destroyed the wooden structure. It was rebuilt by Emperor Augustus, who also added an imperial box on the Palatine Hill. A large obelisk from Heliopolis was added to the spina as a decoration. The obelisk can now be found at the centre of the Piazza del Popolo. Another obelisk was added much later in the 4th century. A second fire in AD 64, which started in wooden shops at the bottom around the track, started the fire that burned much of Rome during the reign of Emperor Nero. Rome Reborn is an international initiative whose goal is the creation of 3D digital models illustrating the urban development of ancient Rome, from the first settlement in the late Bronze Age to the depopulation of the city in the early Middle Ages. With the advice of an international scientific advisory committee, the leaders of the project decided that AD 320 was the best moment in time to begin the work of modelling.
It very much enriching people's experience when they go to Rome because having been there and having visited a lot of these places, the ruins are pretty amazing, but it's difficult to get a really good sense of what it was like when it was kind of in full bloom and all the buildings were there, and it was really just a totally different environment.
Ancient Rome 3D shows almost the entire city within the 13-mile-long Aurelian walls as it appeared in AD 320. At that time, Rome was the multicultural capital of the Western world, and had reached the peak of its development with an estimated population of 1 million. Rome Reborn began at the University of California, Los Angeles, and was the culmination of more than a decade of work by an international team of archaeologists, architects, and computer specialists.
The model that we're using has been constructed very meticulously by a team of researchers in order to faithfully represent the way Rome would have looked in 320 AD. This same technology could be used for a number of reconstruction efforts, whether it's in Rome or Mayan ruins or some other archaeological site.
Information technology has permitted them to recreate buildings and monuments that no longer exist, and to digitally restore sites that have been damaged with the passage of time. The results can be used in research to test new theories and in teaching to take students on virtual tours of the historical sites.
Ogni stanza è dotata di alcuni sensori posti sotto il tetto, quindi sopra la nostra testa, che riescono a rilevare la nostra presenza. Quindi una telecamera filtrata agli infrarossi riesce a riconoscere il passaggio di una persona e riesce a mandare un input al segnale, un input al computer, basato proprio sul rilevamento della sua ombra, della sua presenza. Quindi se io mi avvicino a uno schermo e con una mano cerco di pulire un affresco, c'è in realtà una telecamera nascosta con infrarosse che riesce a filtrare i miei movimenti e a trasformarli per un input utilizzabile dal computer.
3D Rewind Rome, the interactive museum of ancient Rome, is located next to the Colosseum. The museum offers an interactive journey through imperial Rome.
Dal punto di vista del successo, credo che sia un grande successo internazionale, nel senso che abbiamo interesse e richieste di visite da tutto il mondo, quindi in poche settimane abbiamo raggiunto oltre 30.000 visitatori. Io credo che oggi il MAV sia il museo più visitato in Campania.
Today's great challenge is preservation of what has been uncovered in ancient Rome. Man is a fortunate species. Over thousands of years, our intelligence has given us tools and technology, art and science, society and civilization. We now possess a treasure house of man's great achievements.